Everyone, I am Richard Turner, the Executive Director of the Community Media Center, and I want to welcome you to tonight, our Candidates Forum for District 3 County Commissioners. It's a pleasure to see everyone tonight and our candidates. And as part of our efforts as a nonprofit organization, we want to make sure that we can inform our community about the choices that you have in the upcoming primary election. So as part of our efforts, I hope you know us as from our programming on channels 19 and 23 on Comcast, as well as live streaming on the web. So it's great to have everyone tonight, and we are actually live on the web. You have cards in your seats, so we'll be able to take your questions for the candidates, and some of the questions have already been pre-submitted through our, as you'll find out in a moment, that were pre-submitted through our websites. And so, again, it's great to have everyone here and get involved in the process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Honorable Charles Harrison. He is a former, or is a Vietnam veteran, former pilot and Bronze Star winner, also former judge of the Orphans Court. And he has the distinction of being, among his other duties that he serves in the community, he is our chairman of the board of directors for the Community Media Center. So welcome, Charles.
Thank you, and good evening, and welcome to the District 3 Commissioners Candidates Forum. As Richard said, my name is Charles Harrison, chair of the Community Media Center. A new outlook, a new director, all geared to service you all here in Carroll County. But tonight's forum is being held at the Westminster Senior Center. The program is being streamed live on the Community Media Center website at carrollmedia.org. The program will be rebroadcast again on cable channels 19 and 23 beginning Tuesday, May 15th. The Carroll Media Center is partnering with Carroll County Times to provide this program as a public service to the community. We encourage citizens to learn more about the candidates, understand who they are and what their platform is and how they position and what they propose to do for you, the citizens of Carroll County. I will now turn the program over to our moderator, Mr. Wayne Carter, editor of the Carroll County Times. Mike?
Thank you, Chuck. Pardon me. Thank you. As a moderator for this evening, first I'll introduce each of the candidates, and after that, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. Following the forum introductions, I will then ask the first question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and all candidates will answer the identical question. Just to be clear, this is not a debate, it's only an informational forum. At the conclusion of the question period, and before the ending of the forum for this evening, each candidate will have another 2 minutes for a summary statement. All responses will be timed, and our timekeeper will give the candidates a signal when 30 seconds remains. The timekeeper will ring the bell 2 to 3 seconds after the final stop signal is given, and at that point I may interrupt you and discontinue your statement or answer at that time. The questions that we're going to have tonight have been selected from those submitted in advance to the Carroll County Times, the Community Media Center, and also ones that are submitted from tonight's live audience. Tonight's forum is being recorded, so we do remind everyone, turn off your cell phones, and ask that any attendees refrain from applause or making noise during the forum or doing anything visible or audible to express support or opposition to any candidate in the forum. With all that said, let us begin. I'll start by introducing Commissioner Dennis Frazier, Republican, and he can give his opening statement.
Hi, my name is Dennis Frazier, and I'm your current Carroll County Commissioner for District 3. I am running for re-election. I'm also a part-time teacher for Carroll County Public Schools, and I currently coach wrestling for the Castell Academy. I'm in my 39th year as a teacher, and my teaching career is quickly coming to an end. This is either a great thing or a sad thing, depends on which day you ask me about it. I'm married to Debbie, and we have 2 grown children, Christopher and Sarah. In the past 3 years working as your commissioner, the Board of Commissioners and myself have accomplished a lot. Carroll County has experienced unprecedented economic growth. Carroll County businesses have added over 1,300 new jobs, and businesses have put in over $332 million of capital investment into our county. The message has gotten out that Carroll County, like the state of Maryland, is open for business. In fact, Carroll leads the entire state in new manufacturing jobs. We also have added 3 solar fields in Carroll County that will save the county at least $500,000 a year. The solar fields were installed and are being maintained at no expense to taxpayers of Carroll County. We're currently exploring new locations for more solar fields so we can save even more money. I am hopeful that by the end of my second term, solar will be saving the county millions of dollars. However, what I am most proud of is working to keep county workers working in Carroll. The Board of Commissioners have provided funding to improve wages and working conditions for all the agencies that we fund. This includes our own county workers, Carroll Community College, the Sheriff's Department, the school system, and the nonprofits. And we have done all this without raising taxes. I believe we have made great strides, but more needs to be done. Therefore, I'm asking for your vote on June 26th so I can continue working for the citizens of Carroll County, making our county an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Mr. Tom Gordon, Republican.
Good evening. I want to thank the Carroll County Times and the Carroll Media Center for hosting this forum tonight. I'd like to thank everybody who's attending and those that are watching at home online. I'm a longtime Carroll County resident, and I grew up here in Westminster. I graduated from Westminster High School and went on to attend Western Maryland College, now McDaniel. My wife, Kate, and I are products of the Carroll County school system. I'm involved within our community with a number of organizations, including serving on boards of several, including the Boys and Girls Club of Westminster, the Carroll County Land Trust. I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce Legislative Committee, and previously was on the board of the Historical Society of Carroll County. Growing up in Carroll, it has always been the ideal to give back and to contribute to our community. I know and understand that Carroll County must work to maintain a balance between community preservation and economic innovation. My background in business has allowed me to make key decisions with nonprofit organizations as well as multi-million-dollar corporations. These experiences have ensured that I have the knowledge and expertise to handle a wide variety of issues and challenges. Throughout my time in the business world, I have also worked with national and worldwide organizations. I've made direct decisions affecting not only employment, but also representing significant sums of money and assets in the millions of dollars. When we look at the concerns of our county, we must look at it as a whole instead of looking at it piece by piece. My door will always be open to any and all members of the community, as I'm here to serve you as your county commissioner. I know we can better utilize the unique characteristics of both District 3 and the county overall and use our agricultural and businesses to assist our future generations to come. We have big decisions on the horizon in our county. Together, we can and we will chart the future properly for District 3 and all of Carroll County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Doug Mathias, Democrat.
Thank you. I'm Doug Mathias, lifelong resident of Westminster. I went to work with my dad when I was 10 years old at Mathias Monuments. Later left to work for both houses of Congress, where I spent 16 years. Then went to Allegheny County, Maryland, up in Western Maryland, where I worked on their manufacturing plans as they were losing the Kelly Springfield plant at that time. I was hired, and they brought me back to Westminster to be the only executive director in the history of the Greater Westminster Development Corporation. And we redeveloped many downtown landmarks here in the city of Westminster, and also spent quite a career working in different businesses and as a consultant, actually, as well. I'm the only candidate running who has a master's in public administration. It's from the University of Baltimore. I'm also trustee emeritus of St. Mary's College of Maryland, the Public Honors College, where I went to school and was later appointed by 2 Maryland governors to the Board of Trustees. And I have a lot of expectations for Carroll County in the next 4 years. My slogan basically is vote for the future. We're going to be able to discuss a lot of issues tonight that would do things a little bit differently as far as spending public money in Carroll County. And I look forward to the opportunity of being in the primary election, and I ask for your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last, we have Ms. Maria Warburton.
Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone who is here in person or watching elsewhere, as well as thank all those who have had a hand in bringing about this forum. Similar to the other 3 candidates, I am running for the office because I believe in giving back to my community. During my 30 years in Carroll, I've been a volunteer basketball and soccer coach, served on a previous county master plan committee, was very involved in scouting when my sons were younger, and currently volunteer at the Cold Weather Shelter. I'm a certified volunteer tax preparer and active in the Junior Women's Club of Westminster, to name a few things. I believe what sets me apart from the other candidates, aside from the obvious, is my experience as a problem solver and negotiator. At the U.S. Forest Service, I worked on forest management plans that balanced the needs of recreational users with those of private enterprises. During my time with the Maryland Department of the Environment, I collaborated with counties and towns across the state on cost-effective ways to implement regulations mandated by the federal government and our state legislatures. In fact, I was involved in the discussions a couple years ago with Carroll representatives regarding the disposition of the rain tax. During my current position with the City of Gaithersburg, I successfully argued for the removal of alleged stormwater violations during settlement discussions following an audit by the EPA. I also have experience in the private sector, including as a part-time tax preparer for 10 years, where I was primarily paid on commission, meaning customer service and thoroughness were essential in building a base of returning clients. I believe my breadth and depth of knowledge and experience set me apart in this field of candidates for the position of County Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and with that, we'll start with our first question. And we'll start on this end with Commissioner Frazier. Question for all the candidates. What is your attitude toward residential and commercial growth in Carroll County?
Well, I believe we need additional residential and commercial growth in Carroll County. We have had basically unprecedented commercial industrial growth in the last 3 years here in Carroll County because of the way that we go about doing it. If we don't grow, we die. Good growth is about 3% a year. If you don't have 3% growth a year, things just stagnate and nothing happens for the county. The commercial growth here, we're trying to get more businesses in here. We're trying to get more light industry in here. We're trying to get more in with our high-speed fiber. One of the reasons I wanted to put high-speed fiber around the business parks in Carroll County so more businesses would come here. A lot of people or a lot of businesses say that they don't see a need for it, but once you get in and you start using something, you see a need for it and you start expanding upon it at the same time. I remember when I first had a computer as a teacher, I didn't see a need for the computer. But now the fact is I use it every single day with my classes. There is no not need for it. So I do believe we need more business and commercial growth in Carroll County. We need to balance that with our county heritage and our agricultural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
Could you repeat the question, Wayne?
Sure. What is your attitude toward residential and commercial growth in Carroll County?
Well, obviously, when you look at agriculture and you look at both business and residential growth within the county, that's a balancing act. We're in a position where we have almost a little over 70,000 acres that are currently in ag preservation, and yet we're also trying to balance between commercial growth, which is important because that helps offset the taxes that could be placed on the property owners and can instead be deferred. And we also need to look out for the residential folks as well. One of the things that, if people take a hard look back over the last few years, yes, we've had growth in Carroll, but prior to that, we have been almost in line with Baltimore City's numbers for growth. So while we're growing, and that's good, obviously we need to keep a fair assessment as to where how we're handling that and where we're heading. The last thing we want to do is, as many of us all would agree, is either overgrow it or undergrow it because we have issues in our county, whether it be aging in place, how do we bring in a younger population, and those all have to be factored into our growth issue. If you look at who our next door neighbors are, whether they be Baltimore County or Frederick, those counties compete, whether it be for our businesses or our residents. So we need to be very thorough in how we approach those.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mathias.
I'm very fortunate to be a long-time resident of Westminster. We're very fortunate, too, that Westminster is one of the oldest cities in Carroll County. And because of it, we've already celebrated 250 years of history. But with that history has come great development. We have a nice balance of single-family homes and apartments because you have to start in apartments and, to work your way up to houses. One of the problems in Westminster in this district discussing future development is we don't have water resources which we need to really bring a lot of new development in at this time. We have to rely on the state MDE to, let the city of Westminster bring this water online, which they've been working on for many years, but we still don't have. So there's not going to be a lot of new growth of homes in Westminster in the foreseeable future based on the meeting I saw the other night on the Carroll Media Center from the city of Westminster's last meeting. And, water is still going to be critical. I think there's a nice balance of housing. So I think for the time being, we're basically going to have to keep fixing up what we have, which is the best thing an older community can do.
Okay, Ms. Warburton.
Certainly, as the others have said, I mean, you need to continue to grow to survive, to keep that tax base. I actually would like to see, as far as residential, we have a lot of developments that, are building the larger homes. But I mean, I have friends my age that want to downsize and they want a newer home, and you can't find one that's, say, a rancher, a small Cape Cod. It's all these 3,000 and 4,000 square foot homes. I don't know how, the government can help change that, but I would like to see some developments that had smaller homes that aren't necessarily townhouses, that have 3 levels of steps and all the bells and whistles that bring it up to 300,000 or 400,000. So I do think there's some room there for some variety in the type of housing, and certainly commercial as well. We need we have commercial spaces that are available, and we need to do things to incentivize people to have businesses. But I think more than just residential and commercial is like light industrial or companies that come in and open up here. We have some good businesses here, Kenora Break and others, with good paying jobs. Because the commercial side of things with online shopping and all that, I'm not sure. There has to be Main Street, of course. You have the personal touch, and so that's how you get people to come to commercial shops is through the personal touch. So that we do need to take the advantage of that. So thank you. Time's up.
Okay. Kind of piggybacking on this question from our audience, and we'll start with Mr. Gordon this time. How do you intend to spark economic development in the county so that we become less of a bedroom community?
Well, economic development in our county has been a challenge for a number of reasons, as some other folks have mentioned, one of them being water, which is pretty much the universal issue for all of us. Another issue we have, though, is when you look at our tax base and compare us to the other neighboring counties. So we're competing against other counties, and I'll give you an example. Looking at, say, northern Baltimore County right now, you could buy a 2-acre property with a house and an in-ground pool, and your taxes are going to be less than someone's going to pay in the city of Westminster for less than a half-acre property. So how do we compete with folks like that? Because our tax base is one of the issues. The other issue is we have to step up economic innovation, whether it be through looking at tech companies or other entities. We have a hydroponic farm that was just opened in Carroll, the first in the county. We need to be looking at technology and how we can bring younger folks in and what entices them to come in and want to invest in Carroll. We can stick with the traditional economics and the traditional businesses, but that's not going to be enough. We need to work smarter and stronger to bring in younger folks to fill the void, to help create more economic base for us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mathias.
Okay, thank you very much. I've done economic development, and the best thing you can do first and foremost in any area, especially one like Westminster, is to grow your own businesses. You expand your existing businesses. That is the quickest way to build your tax base, by keeping your people here. That's why Kenora Break was so wonderful, that they did not leave Carroll County. They actually could have gone to 2 other states, but they did stay here because in the end, they were able to put together a package for them. A lot of economic development for the businesses we have had move into Carroll County, it's basically you're giving them mostly job training for their workers. We have a wonderful labor force here, And there's plenty of people always looking for work that have very good skills based on, not only the community college, but also McDaniel College, which has trained a lot of people with college degrees and skills, and they stay here in this community. And that's one of the best things we can do, is to keep these people here. It makes our community stronger. So I would continue those things. The county economic department has a pretty good budget, and a lot of that budget is now used for tax credits for businesses who are trying to expand their workforce. And I think that's exactly what we should be using that money for. So I would make sure that that budget continues to be funded as a county commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warburton.
Sure. I think Carroll County needs to promote, I know we're doing it somewhat now, but promote the advantages that Carroll does have. We have the fiber network. We have Ting in the city of Westminster and the surrounding areas. The county's also doing fiber network. We have a reputation of having good schools. We need to maintain that reputation. And industries want to move to a place where they know they're going to attract a good workforce or be able to use an existing good workforce. So we need to keep all those things about Carroll County that make people want to live here and stay here. Kenora Brake's been mentioned. There's other companies, FlowServe in Tawnytown, that I know people that work there, and they pay a decent salary. And I think part of it, as far as maintaining the workforce, is to have, student loans is a huge issue, and I think we need to take advantage of like Carroll Community College. Don't have that a stigma to attend, there for a year before you go elsewhere, so that people living here, young people, don't get out of college with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, and they don't feel like they have to move elsewhere to get a job that pays a salary twice as much as maybe a company here is paying, just so they can pay off their student loans. Our younger son went to Carroll Community College for a year. Every single credit transferred to Loyola University in Maryland, and he saved $30,000. So I think we need to take advantage of what we already have and build on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frazier.
The question was on economic development, right?
Yes.
Being last thing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think we're already doing a tremendous amount for economic development in Carroll County. If you look at District 3 right now, when I ran for this position last time, we had large empty buildings on the business park off 97. We don't have any of those empty buildings now. Matter of fact, we don't have any empty lots right now. Everything is either being built up or has already been built up in that area. The only limiting factor in District 3 right now is water. I have been working with Secretary Grumbles, who's the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Environment, to try to get some things opened up here in Westminster. We're looking at some ways to get the Maryland Department of Environment to ease up some things and to look at some other ways for us to get water in here, because that's our only limiting factor. We're doing everything that we need to do to keep businesses coming in here. One of the comments was made about Carroll County giving tax breaks for businesses. We don't do that. We don't give businesses tax breaks to come in here. We never have. We're not going to start doing it. What we do is we build the infrastructure at the business parks. They come in and they use it. We do work with the state of Maryland that gives grants or loans out. And when businesses hit certain benchmarks, for instance, so much capital investment in the area, so many new employees, so high-paying jobs, those kind of things, if they hit all those benchmarks at the time they're supposed to hit them, then the loan from the state of Maryland becomes a grant and they do not have to pay it back. That's how we're getting businesses here. That's one of the reasons Nora Brake stayed here. That's how we're getting businesses to move into this district instead of going to Pennsylvania, to other counties. We're doing the right things right now to keep businesses in Carroll County. We just got to keep moving forward in the same direction we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Mathias. We've had a couple come in from our audience regarding public school system, so I'll try and kind of combine them into one. Essentially, it sort of boils down to, as the cost to running the school system have continued to increase, and the county commissioners have had to put more toward that. If elected, what would you do to continue, funding Carroll County public schools at an appropriate level, and what do you deem an appropriate level? That's
a good question. I'm very happy to get that one. I agree that the Carroll County public school system is currently well underfunded, I do not support that. I believe we should fund them as a priority in the county budgets, and I would hope that next year they would be the starting point for the fiscal year 2020 budget. You start right there with the request from the Board of Education. I don't think it helps Carroll County when we're not funding education fully to meet their needs, because it's going to be harder and harder to bring companies and people into our communities, because they're looking first and foremost for a strong educational system. They want their children to go to a very good school with the proper resources and the best teachers they can get, because we know today, if you look at a lot of the things in our country, life learning is very important, and you learn that early. You learn that when you first start school, and they're learning it now in the pre-K. The ages get younger and younger, and you know, in our technology that we use today in the world, I mean, you're getting that much quicker. I would fund education first and foremost, and would be happy to be a commissioner that would do that. Every family I talk to is most concerned in our county about not funding the school system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warburton.
I agree. I would absolutely support, schools funding should be a priority. Same thing, talking with families. Why they moved here, schools is at the top of the list. One thing that we can all do to help with the funding issue is the House and Senate at Maryland almost unanimously passed the Fix the Fund bill, so that the money that's being earned from casinos is supposed to go into the education fund. In the past, it goes into the fund, and the same amount of money comes out. It's supposed to be a supplement, not come in and go out. That's going to be on the ballot in November. So everyone should go out in November and vote yes on Fix the Fund bill, and that should bring much more state money into the counties, including Carroll County. So that's one thing we can all do. I do think there might be some areas of duplication of effort that could be looked at to save some expenses. Personally, I'd like to see much more coordination between the high schools and Carroll Community College. There's classes maybe at the Career and Tech Center that could be taught at the college instead, computer science courses, accounting courses. You know, is there some way that that could be coordinated so that the space at the Career and Tech is opened up for more Career and Tech classes? Also, I know other counties, they have, the community college has teachers or professors come in and teach courses right in the high school to start getting college credits. So I think there's a lot of innovative things that can be looked at. You know, as a commissioner, I wouldn't necessarily be doing that, but I do think there's ways to both bring more funding and to eliminate maybe a few duplication of effort areas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Well, one of the things we have to do is we have to work with the state. The state of Maryland has given less money percentage-wise and dollar-wise to the school system over the last 3 years. Carroll County government has increased what we've given them over the last 3 years. This year, in our preliminary budget, we had $3.5 million extra added in for the school system. We added another $2 million on top of that, and still it didn't close the gap completely. Because the fact is, right, you hear a lot of different things. What the state added to that was $311,000 from last year. We give $5.5 million more, and the state gets $311,000. And people look at us, why aren't you funding the school system? We're doing the best we can do. And someone mentioned about it, priority. If you look at, someone said before, you want to know what my priorities are, look at my checkbook. You want to know what the county's priorities are, look at where they budget their money. Most of the money for the county goes to the school systems, and it should. And we're doing that right now. It is a priority with us. But it's not the only agency that we fund. We have to look at other people across. You have to look at the Sheriff's Department. You have to look at Carroll Community College. You have to look at Public Works. You have to look at everything else with the county as well. It all has to be balanced. While we do give a good amount of money to the school system, I don't know if anyone's aware of this or not, but I'm a part-time teacher. I don't know if it's ever been brought up from the last election, but so I'm very cognizant of what should be going to the schools and what the schools need. And you know, we're doing the best we can. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gordon.
Well, obviously, as a number of other folks has mentioned up here this evening, you know, we're dealing with funding issues both on the state level. Part of it also, though, needs to be a factor of, yes, the county writes the check to the Board of Education, but it's also how the Board of Education handles that funding. There's been talk and there's current discussions within the Board of Education about, you know, redistricting, reconfiguring some of the schools, possibly closing some additional schools, and potentially maybe some of that funding could be utilized and handed over to teachers for step increases and those type of things, whereas right now, most of this funding is just being utilized, whether it be for decaying buildings and other issues. But one of the biggest issues that it factors into funding, whether anybody wants to understand or think about it, is we have a divisive issue, not just on the national level, but also on the local level. When you have two boards, whether it be the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners, and people are, you know, claiming possible lawsuits and all these other issues, this is not why we're here. Education is to fund and look out for the children of Carroll County first, and that has to be a priority. People need to take their political issues on both sides, those two sides of that street, and put those aside, because otherwise we're accomplishing absolutely nothing for either the school system, the taxpayers, or the county at large. So we need to start looking also at how some of this funding from the state will change. It's been very ridiculous, for a lack of a better way of putting it, that the state had set aside these funds supposedly from gambling, which we never got. I mean, that's as pathetic can be. But my point is, we have to collectively sit down on both sides and work together. It's not going to be just us writing a check or them just doing what they need. We got to collectively work together as a community.
Okay, thank you. For this next question, we'll start with Ms. Warburton. What do you believe the county government's role should be in combating the opioid epidemic, and what else can be done?
So there is a lot of things that are currently going on to fight the opioid epidemic. The health department actually is doing a really good job at being the kind of the central figurehead. They have an opioid misuse planning group that's overseen, like I say, by the health department, that encompasses people from the health department, from the county commissioners, from the hospital, from the sheriff's office, the state's attorney's office, and they meet and they discuss, you know, a lot of what's happening. One thing that just started was on May 1st, the county now has a 14-hour mobile crisis service 365 days a year, from the morning through midnight, and then the hours that it's not being serviced, the hospital kind of takes over. If people come to the hospital, they would stay there until the crisis center opens in the morning. So as county commissioner, I think the role would be to support the things that are already happening, provide funding, talk to them, see what role we can have. I don't want to come in and make any you know, wholesale changes to what's happening already. Speaking to people, like I say, at the health department and other places, there's already a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I know it may not seem like it because the overdose deaths are still occurring, but you know, I think the commissioners should play a support role and do funding and be advocates as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Frazier.
Thank you. One of the first things we did as a Board of Commissioners when I was elected last time is we put money aside for the Not in Carroll Initiative. We put millions of dollars into this, and the Not in Carroll Initiative is something where the Sheriff's Department and the State's Attorney are working together to get the drug dealers out of Carroll County. It's extremely hard to do that, let's face the facts, but the State's Attorney's Office has a specific prosecutor that takes the people once they're arrested for drug dealing and follows them all the way through the system to make sure nothing falls between the cracks. The Sheriff's Department has a dedicated task force that goes out and looks for drug dealers and tries to get them, either run them out of Carroll or arrest them. So we've already committed millions of dollars to that. But another thing we can do as commissioners, we can look for legislation and propose legislation to Annapolis that would help us out here. I proposed 3 pieces of legislation this last session. I'm going to talk about them briefly. First one I propose is that if you overdose on drugs and you are brought back through Narcan or whatever it is, you should be held for 12 hours. overdosing on drugs or taking drugs in that amount is self-destructive behavior, in my opinion, and other people's opinion as well. If you try to commit suicide, they hold you for 72 hours. So someone that overdoses, it'd be a good idea to hold them for 12 hours. In that 12-hour time period, you can evaluate the person, you can work it, give them some counseling, you can tell them what the next steps are, maybe even get them into rehab. Without that 12-hour period, most people get up, they walk out. The paramedics are seeing them again in a couple of weeks. Another thing I proposed, and I don't have much time left, was if you go into rehab, when you come out, your next thing starts the next day. Because right now you go into rehab, your intensive counseling or whatever comes afterwards sometimes doesn't start for 7 or 10 days. So you put these people back into the neighborhoods they were using drugs in with no help at all. Not the right thing to do. My time is up, so I have to stop. I have 2 mothers? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, Mr. Gordon.
Well, obviously, the opioid epidemic and all the challenges that go with us have affected us all, whether it's family, whether it's friends, colleagues. It's a huge crisis, not only in our community, but every other community. It's a crisis through the state of Maryland. It's a crisis also in this country. Obviously, to date, we've been very successful with our state's attorney's programs, the Not in Carroll initiative. One of the things I think we do very well in Carroll, though, and we have a tendency to really point this out in a consistent manner, is we talk about our nonprofits. And we really utilize them in ways that we as the county government can't fully accomplish. And I would seriously be curious to spend some time, and that we would look into some of the nonprofits that we have in our community, seeing what we're already doing. Can we add in some additional support from these nonprofits to see if we can further that fight, both collectively. One example, and I was just at an event the other evening where Darryl Strawberry was in attendance, was the Westminster Rescue Mission's 50th anniversary. And it was very touching and eye-opening to hear some of the comments from some of the participants that have been involved with the Westminster Rescue Mission and what they've gone through both as treatment and also just the overall process. So I think given how well Carroll works with our nonprofits, I think we should also look at collectively trying to work with some of those additional nonprofits throughout the community.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mathias.
I'm somewhat involved on one of the committees. I'm on 2 committees with the local health department. One is the cancer subcommittee, and there's a reason for that because I'm a cancer survivor, and I serve as a public citizen on that committee. Also serve as a public citizen on a committee called the Local Health Improvement Coalition. Lisa Wack is here tonight as well. She's also a member. And it's an incredible clearinghouse of information of people who respond every day to the medical needs in our community. And there are about 25 representatives that come to these meetings, and their organizations have emergency services. So whenever they're contacted by either somebody at the health department or somebody from the sheriff's office, if it's been an opioid problem immediately, there's a quick response team set up. But the members of the committee Lisa's on also do follow-ups with not only the person who is taking drugs and having a hard time doing it, but also help for the family. And if they need to be referred to other Carroll County operations for just about any medical type service they would need, or other type services, including the shelters, that's being taken care of as soon as they're called into action. So there's a team in place. And I fully support that effort. And I think Ed Singer, the head of the local health department, is doing an incredible job keeping everybody in the room and in the loop on these things.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next question will start back up to Mr. Frazier again. We'll talk about the budget a little bit. Do you believe the existing revenues that are being generated by the county are sufficient to effectively cover all the necessary expenditures in Carroll County? And if not, how would you propose generating more revenue? And if you do, Do you approve of the current distribution of county revenues?
Well, obviously, the amount of revenues coming in is adequate to cover the needs we have in the county right now because we have balanced the budget. And when we balance the budget in Carroll County, we look for not only this year, but the next 5 years down the road. It'd be so much easier just to plug in one-time money in this year's budget and balance it and have everything that you need. We don't do that. One of the things we did in this year's budget, we took $8 million of one-time money that we had and we spread it out over 4 years so we would balance that budget for those coming years. If we didn't have to balance the budget for the next 4 or 5 years, we wouldn't have to do that. There aren't too many counties or municipalities around the state to do it the way we do it. I think there might be 1 or 2 others in the entire state to do it that way. But when you do it that way, you look at ongoing costs and what has to occur with revenues and so forth. One of the ways that we're keeping up with the rising costs is by our tremendous economic growth in this county. We have added, as I've said already tonight, over 1,300 new jobs in Carroll County, and actually that's just in the last 2 years alone, 1,300 new jobs in this county. The business park out in 97 is packed. Other businesses are dying to come in here. If we had some more water around, we'd have more businesses flying in here, trust me. I think economic development, economic growth is a great way to look at this right now. We have looked at some inventive ways to move money allocation from one thing to another to balance the budget this year. Hopefully, with economic growth, we won't have to do that next year, but we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gordon.
Could you repeat the question, Wayne, please?
Sure. Do you believe the existing revenues being generated by the county are sufficient to effectively cover the necessary expenditures in the county? And if not, how would you propose generating more revenue? And if you do you approve of the current distribution of county revenues?
Well, I think we do a fair job given what we've got to work with. I do think, though, there are areas within our budget that we need to spend some additional time looking at. There are availability of funds that we may potentially in the future not be taking full advantage of. Some of those would pertain to us getting state or federal matching money. Example I'll give you, the other night at the other forum, there was a comment made about the state of Maryland cutting AgPres. The state of Maryland under Governor Hogan has increased AgPres funding since he got in office. And according to MAUF, there is looking to be $100 million of additional funding over the next 2 years. So we need to make certain with any of those entities that we could take additional funding through matched funding, that we're actually looking at those and taking them to the fullest extent. But back in July of 17, we took us off constant yield, which while it's great that we have all this economic growth that I'm completely supportive of, we also put the burden back on the taxpayers due to their assessments being adjusted and their taxes being raised. So we are creating another issue for our residents. So I think realistically, at some point, I think the entire budget in various areas needs to be looked over as to how we're allocating some of our funding. But I think when we're looking at, like we're doing again this year, we're going to play with constant yield again. We're going to have another tax increase on the backs of the property owners. So to answer your question, I think we're doing a decent job. I don't think it's where it could be or where it should be, but I think it has potential for improvement.
Okay, Mr. Mathias.
I'm against tax increases in the next year, if that was just mentioned as a possibility. I think revenues are strong right now for what they're able to do. I just think we need some new priorities when we go to fund our next budgets. And I think there are some projects that have been discussed recently, and even in editorial in the newspaper, that money has been parked in projects that may not get local matching funds. And, you know, that money could possibly be re-engineered for another use, especially if something comes up in an emergency situation. I don't know if there's a tremendous amount of surplus monies in the next budgets. I again watched today the FY19 on Channel 24, where I get a lot of information. And one of the good things about that is when you look ahead into the next 6 years, the budget director is very clear that, you know, they're tight. They're extremely tight. And when the commissioners this time finished the budget hearings on April 26, they finished by saying, wow, we wish we had some more money. We really need a lot more money. I wonder where it is. Well, you've already spent it. It's already parked in different places for good uses, of course, because, you know, we need those funds to fund our programs. When people give money through property taxes and also income taxes to the state that comes back into Carroll County, what you have to remember is, you know, that money was given not voluntarily. I mean, that money's given, you know, because they need to put it in. It's not like a nonprofit, the county. The county is not a nonprofit. It's not that you can have a choice to send us a check or not. When you get to the county government, you have to pay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warburton.
I do think, yes, there are some challenges with the budget. It's true that the commissioners do provide a 5 or 6 year budget, operating budget out, and those are balanced on paper. But some things aren't taken into consideration with that. There's no consideration for the cost of any paid firefighters. There were some challenges this year with the sheriff's office came in with a request for raises to keep sheriff deputies from leaving for other, you know, Carroll County is basically a training ground, and sheriff's deputies leave after a couple years. They received some funding on that, but not the full amount that they were asking for. If you look at the revenues for the unappropriated reserves, it's money that went unspent in past years. There's $11 million in this year's budget and only $6 million or so in the out-year budgets. So there was a lot of shifting around of money to make these balance. So it's you know, in my opinion, it's a very precarious budget, and there might have to be some hard decisions made in the future as far as what to fund and what not to fund. And I think it's going to have to come, you know, from the citizens, from the residents to decide, you know, hear from them and say what are the important items and what aren't. But I think there are some challenges, not necessarily this coming year, but certainly in the out years, and we'll have to take a hard look at things.
Okay, thank you. This next question, we'll start with Mr. Gordon. Recently, the state-mandated school resource officers or adequate law enforcement coverage at every school, which the county had to fund. But beyond school resource officers, what additional measures do you think the commissioners should consider and consider funding to keep schools safe?
Well, in reference to that, part of the SRO funding, and I know there's been back and forth between both the county government and also the delegation and the members in the legislature talking as to how that funding is to take place. So there has not been a clear conversation, and I've heard that on both sides, as to how much funding we're getting and what that will total out to be completely at this point. Part of that we have to apply for. But in reference to that, I know there's been talk about should we add additional, say, crisis counselors. In some cases, I think that might actually be a very good idea, because we need to interact with the student body before there's a crisis. We need to interact with these kids. And if some of the other areas that have SROs, there is an issue where the interactions with the SROs are actually dialing down some of the problems before we get to that point. So whether they're a crisis counselor or they're an SRO, there is a relationship built between the children in the school system and those SROs. So I think we have an opportunity with that to help bring that down, so we have less of a issue with violence in the school system. But I also think we could and should take some look into what other issues there may be. I wouldn't specifically make a determination at this point, but I think we should study it a bit and look farther into it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mathias.
I think the school situation, as you look at the national news, I mean, we've seen many tragic things happening in communities that never expected to have these problems. And I think the SROs, I commend Commissioner Frazier for their immediate support for the SROs in Carroll County. They're setting up the 10 positions in two distinct budget years. I think that was the actual best response they could have done, and I commend you for that. And I think that's a great start here in Carroll County. I would think, too, that the Board of Education will also be working on, what they think the need might be for some of their schools that might go beyond that. And I'd be very much interested in hearing from the Board of Education in the next year on how we could further strengthen that program for safety in schools.
Okay, Ms. Warburton.
Well, following up on Mr. Mathias, yes, as commissioner, I don't think we would be the frontline decision makers on what should be done. Our role would be a support role. I'm sure there's, facilities personnel at each school, that each school is laid out a little differently. There's different entry points. There's different number of students there. So they best know what specific items would be better for each school. If there's, one location where there can be a series of doors where someone comes in and then has to be, there's a camera and then they have to be let in the next door. Each school is a little different. So I would have the Board of Education, the Sheriff's Office, maybe other groups, parent groups take the lead on that and, act in a supporting role. I do support the SROs. My understanding is the School Security Council came out in favor of that, as did the Sheriff's Office. And so when there's, consensus that that's a good thing to do, then I would support the funding. But I would defer to the experts in coming up with the initial plan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Well, I think we need to be more proactive with putting more counselors in the schools. Right now, I believe, and I might have this number a little bit off, there's one counselor basically in the school system for every 400 kids. That's not near the state standard. Shaking your head no, but it's close. Okay, so it's not near the state standard. I think the state standard is 1 to every 250, something of that sort. So we need more counselors in the schools. We need the counselors in here because, as I mentioned, this is my 39th year of teaching. When you're around the schools and you know the students, you can see when a student has something's not quite right with them. If you can't say to why don't you go to see the counselor or call the counselor up and say, Johnny's having a terrible day today, maybe you should come down and talk to him. Things like that need to happen. That way you can head off a lot of these problems. So we do need more counselors in the schools. We also need the schools to follow the same a very similar protocol when they allow people to come into the building. Now, the fact is, no matter how they harden the buildings, if people want to come in, someone wants to get in, they're going to get in. If I recall correctly, Sandy Hook, the person shot his way through the door to get into that building. We can't do much to stop that, but we can have the same type of protocols for all the buildings, where you have to buzz in. Maybe my suggestion, and I'm not just the school security people, but have a foyer area where the person comes into, they look at them, ask them what their business is, and then they proceed in the building. But like was already mentioned earlier, the schools are all different. They're built at different times. Some people might get into a door and then go directly to the office because it's right across, or some might get into a door, have to go up 2 flights of steps or something before they get to the office. In the intervening time, things can happen. So we need to look at those situations as well. But my number one thing would be more counselors in school would help be more proactive. Thank you.
Okay. All right. This next question, we'll start with, excuse me, we'll start with Mr. Mathias. Back in March, the commissioners passed an ethics ordinance that's been debated whether it's sufficient or not. Do you believe the ethics ordinance that was passed is sufficient, or it needs to be amended? And if you believe it needs to be amended, how so and why?
Thank you for the question. I believe it should have been passed because we had to be in compliance with the state. The state of Maryland is in charge of ethics in the state of Maryland. They have built the boilerplate for people who serve in governments. And for us to have played with that for 8 years and not been very clear in leading the county on the fact that, yes, we do need ethics, the taxpayers expect ethics, The expectations are even higher than that. And I look forward to, if successful in becoming a commissioner, to work for the next 4 years to have stronger disclosure and also on candidate contributions. I think there's a problem, especially in this district, with candidate contributions. I think in many cases they come from people who do business with the county. It's something that you don't see. You might see the contribution. You don't see what they get from the county in return later. It's a bad system. I think ethics should be stronger. I think we should be very clear that we're not going to tolerate things that aren't up and honest every day when you go to work in Carroll County. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Warburton.
I do think it was the right thing to finally come into compliance with the state ethics mandate after 8 years of it being, we being one of 2 counties that was not. As far as the actual ethics ordinance that's currently in place, I mean, we as candidates received the new questionnaire. I did find some of the questions that were asked kind of odd, like, you know, you asked for any property you owned anywhere in the country or the world, but then they didn't ask other questions about more localized stuff, like about debts and that sort of thing. But apparently, you know, the questionnaire we received is what is currently the state mandate. So we are at least now compliant with the minimum, and I think that's a good thing. It certainly could be looked at whether or not we want to go beyond that or not. One thing I did find odd, I did get an email a few weeks ago that someone had reviewed the ethics, my submittal that I had made, the questionnaire, and it gave the person's name, which I thought was a bit odd. I don't know if that's a state requirement or the county just did that. I haven't had the chance to look into it, but that seems like it would discourage people from asking for that information if they know that their name is going to be released to the person. I think if it had just said someone from the Westminster area had reviewed your submission, I think that would have been sufficient. So I did find it a little disconcerting. If I wanted to look at someone else's, they would know that I looked at it. So, but no, I'm glad that we're now compliant with state law.
Okay, Mr. Frazier.
Well, I want to start off by saying that the ethics ordinance that we passed is the exact same ethics ordinance that every other county in the state of Maryland has passed. It is the exact same ethics ordinance that the city of Baltimore has passed. It is the exact same ethics ordinance that the state uses for all their state workers. It's nothing different. There have been people out there that are saying that we handpicked an ordinance so to make things work for us. It's the exact same ethics ordinance that every other jurisdiction that has passed the ethics ordinance has passed throughout the state of Maryland. It says, and people have also said this ordinance is not as tough as the ordinance that it replaces. In fact, the state says just the opposite, because when the ethics ordinance came out in 2010 for the county to pass, the county said, well, what about the ethics ordinance we already have? And the state said that if the ethics ordinance is as tough or tougher than what we're putting out there, it's fine. And then they looked at the county ethics ordinance and said, no, it is not as tough or tougher, so you have to change it. You have to go with ours. When it first came back from the last board, not this board, it came back, they looked at it. Commissioner Rothschild, in fact, went over it, made changes to it. The commissioners looked at the changes, sent it into the state. It got sent back saying, no, it is not as tough as what we just sent you. Again, they made changes, Commissioner Rothschild being the main one again, sent it back to the state, and it came back a second time saying, no, this is not as tough as what we sent you. So when my first year in office, I said we should pass this ethics ordinance. I won't mention the commissioner's name, but he was against us passing it right at that time. It took us this long to get it moved forward. So it's the same ordinance everyone else has passed. We finally done it. It was not rushed. It came to us in 2010. It took to 2018 and passed it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gordon.
Well, I think first and foremost, if we're going to be public servants, I think we need to do things in a timely fashion. And I think it's very unfortunate that it took 8 years to pass the ethics bill. I think it's nice that it's finally been passed, but I think it speaks volumes that it wasn't passed sooner. I think there are some areas that could have been upgraded or included. I think personal debts would be an area to look at. I do think that is a factor. And I do find it kind of disconcerting that the general attitude from some of the folks in regards to it passing was, well, just pass it now, we'll fix it later. Well, if I'm your contractor and I'm building your 3-story home, do you want me to just slap the foundation together and build it and hopefully it holds, or do we want to do it right the first time? It should have been done, I think, in a better fashion, because I think the taxpayers and the people of Carroll County deserve better. I think it should have been done many years ago, and it should not have been allowed to lag along through the process. If we were that serious about passing it, we should have done it before. What was the point of waiting till now? So I think there are some areas where it could be improved. I think that it should have been done a long time ago, and I think any of our commissioners within those 8 years should have adamantly kept pushing to have it passed much sooner. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Ms. Warburton, we'll start this next one with you. This is a question that came in from the audience. What are your thoughts? Currently, the county commissioners require a supermajority, a 4-to-1 vote in order to raise taxes. What are your thoughts on that, and do you think it should just be a simple majority, 3-2, in order to raise taxes?
Well, I found it, I mean, the fact that it's a 4-to-1 majority, I'm okay with that. I think when it was voted on, it was allowed to be a 3-person vote to allow it to go to a 4-to-1 majority, which I found kind of odd. Like 3 people can decide that it should be 4 people. So the process I found a little odd. It wasn't this current board that did it. It was, I believe, the board before this one. I do think raising taxes is a very serious issue and should take you know, under a lot of consideration, and should only be a last resort if ever. So, so I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Well, the most important thing that we do as county commissioners is pass the budget. We look at all the tax money that's coming into the county, and we have to make decisions on how the tax money is going to be spent, who's going to get what, the school systems, fire departments, police department, nonprofits, roads, everything. We have to look at all that. It's the most important thing we do for Carroll County. And what's the majority that's required to do that? 3-2. What's the majority required to do any ordinance in Carroll County? 3-2. Why does a supermajority have to be for taxes? I don't understand. The most important thing we do is pass this budget. So why shouldn't everything else be the same? As a matter of fact, I suggested a year or so ago, I don't remember when it was, that if it takes a 4-to-1 majority to raise taxes, then it should also take a 4-to-1 majority to pass the budget. And I was voted down on that. Doesn't make sense, but that's what happened. So no, I'm not for the 4-to-1 majority. I'm for the 3-2, as we do with everything else. We pass everything else in Carroll County with 3-2. Why shouldn't it be the same? Thank you.
In regards to the supermajority, I am completely for having a supermajority to raise taxes. One, yes, taxes are used for required services, whether it be infrastructure, funding, education, and all the other variety of areas that we fund as a county, but I think we have to take it seriously. We don't want to just casually raise taxes. It is a situation where I think the taxpayers of Carroll County appreciate the fact that it takes a supermajority to raise taxes on them. We don't need to be just casually taking more money out of the wallets and pocketbooks of the citizens of Carroll County. I know in the past, Dennis Frazier has asked, not once but twice, that we change that. I completely disagree with that, as I feel we have to keep that in place for the citizens and the taxpayers in the community. So I am for that. I am for keeping a supermajority.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Mr. Mathias.
I would vote as a commissioner to do away with the 4-to-1. All the commissioners are equal. Their vote is equal. 3-2 vote is good enough to spend $411 million in the operating general budget and $95 million in the capital budget. It should be fine for everything. I would think that in the future, we're going to have new members. And many years ago, the people who did the supermajority, they're leaving office this year. So they're retiring. So basically, this shouldn't be bound or binding any future commissioners from serving, you know, without having an equal vote. You have an equal vote, you should use it. 3-2 is 3-2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This next question comes in for our audience, and we'll start with Commissioner Frazier for this one. How important do you feel it is to be proactive in engaging with local small businesses, and how much time can you allocate to meeting with those who you represent?
I think it's very important to be proactive engaging with small businesses, and actually any citizen that's in Carroll County. We have the Small Business Association, we have the Chamber of Commerce, there's many organizations out there that help small businesses. But if they want to come and meet with commissioners or talk to me about anything, I'm all for it. Let's talk, let's get things going. Small businesses are the backbone of the economy in Carroll County. We have to promote them and help them out as much as we possibly can. How much time do I have? I have all the time that anyone needs. Anyone wants to see me, I've always had an open door policy. Call me. At the end of this, I'll be giving out my phone number, by the way. Call me, email me, talk to me, come to the commissioner's office, come see me, set up an appointment. I've always said that, come and talk. I'll be glad to talk anything out with you. I'd much rather have someone come and talk to me about something that they think I've done or haven't done, or something the county's done or hasn't done, than to hear rumors from somebody else. Come to us, ask us, talk to us. We're here to help you out. And like I said, small businesses, backbone of Carroll County. All for them. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gordon.
Could you repeat the question, Wayne?
Sure.
Thank you.
The question was, how important do you feel it is to be proactive when engaging with local small business owners? How much time can you allocate to meeting with those who you represent? I
think it's exceptionally important because they are indeed the backbone of not only our community, but also our country. How much time can I allocate? I allocate as much time as anyone needs. And it's not just a case of I have an open door policy and you can come meet with me. I actually consistently throughout the week, the month, whatever, and numerous people can attest to this, I visit various people, whether it's shopping in their bakery, stopping in at their business just to say how's things going, because I want to know what the pulse of our community is. Because we as public servants, if we do not be proactive and go visit some of those folks, we may never hear from them. Some of those folks can't get away from their business to find the time to come speak to us as elected officials or public servants. So for me, it's not even a question, and it's something I do consistently, and I've done for years throughout my life growing up in Westminster and Carroll County, is I've always been attuned to the various industries, the businesses, and the folks, and I talk to people daily. I mean, I can tell you a list of just within today alone. So I think it's a huge issue for anyone that's running for office, and especially a commissioner within a municipality like Westminster.
Thank you. Mr. Mathias.
I grew up in a small business, Mathias Monument, so I've never forgotten that small businesses are what keeps the community here, what keeps it growing, and it's the source of a lot of pride in every town. And one of the good things about it is that, you know, I spend money with small businesses in Westminster in this area every day, this district, and I'm just going to put in a plug for my campaign. They're making my T-shirts right now at the mall, at the T-shirt store. It's a very small business, and you should go visit them as well. One of the things that we have to do is we shop. We're consumers. We're very consumer-oriented. It's what we do as a people. Our economy starts with whatever we need, whether it's food, clothing, or campaign T-shirts. You have to start with the people around you, and I always give my time to small business, and as I say, we need to expand them, make them bigger, and our community is then stronger. Thank you.
Ms. Warburton.
Yeah, I agree with what the others have said. I mean, small businesses are the heart and soul of a community. It keeps the Main Street vitalized and active. my husband and I, we try to support when we do go out, we support the locally owned restaurants instead of even though the chains, I guess, are run by local people. It's good to go to the local individually owned restaurants and bakeries. And even I might be one of the few that still shops at the mall, but I try to do that instead of online shopping as much as possible. As far as the time allocated, absolutely, they deserve the commissioners' time. I would propose even that some of the commissioners' meetings, maybe once a month, are held in the evening. I mean, they're all during the day. If you don't work in the community, I've always been a commuter outside of the area. It's very difficult to take a day off and attend a commissioner's meeting. Even many of the hearings, zoning board hearings, are during the day. So I would be an advocate maybe once a month to have a commissioner's meeting in the evening instead of always midday. Sure, you can go and watch them later, but it's not the same as being there in person, being able to speak during the the public speaking piece of it, the public comments piece of it. So I would like to see some more evening activities and accessibility by the commissioners.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Gordon, and kind of sticking to small business, question that was emailed into us. If you are elected, what would you do as a county commissioner to help your current base of small businesses to expand and succeed?
Well, we have a lot of wonderful organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, but one of the things I think we need to do for especially small businesses, we need to reach out from the county side. And currently we have a municipal county agreement as to how we fund the municipalities, but I would like us to sit down with the heads of all the municipalities, with the county government, and discuss our main streets throughout the county. Because the main street in any community is the heart and lifeblood of your town. And whether it be Manchester, whether it be Westminster, whether it be Tawnytown, I think we need to take a serious look at some of these areas and figure out how do we improve upon them and how do we help small business succeed in those areas. And when you look at, even just say Westminster, Westminster is a wonderful town. I've grown up here. I was born and raised here. But when you look at Westminster, Westminster has a tendency that we have the downtown area, but when we get too far up to the college, there's not a whole lot going on up there, which I think we could work collaboratively with small business as well as our partners with the college and try to bring some more of our college students down. I've had a couple interns from McDaniel College this year, and they said, well, there's this giant gap between the college and here, and whether they want to walk or whatever, how do we make that work? So I think we have to collaboratively sit down as the county with various municipalities and look at our different areas within each of the municipalities and how we can improve upon that collaboratively.
Thank you. Mr. Mathias.
Would you read the question again? I know it's about small business.
Sure. If elected, what would you do as a county commissioner to help your current base of small businesses to expand and succeed?
Well, I already know, being a resident here, that we have mixed businesses. Some are small, some are medium, some are very large. And together they give us a very excellent place for our workforce to go to work every day. Small businesses, basically what they need to expand and get bigger is access to capital. Unfortunately, in downtown Westminster, our banks have closed. We used to have a large number of local small banks that were able to provide capital every time people needed to expand their businesses. We've gone to national and regional banks now, where they're basically leaving the small town areas and going out to the highways. And that's our situation now in downtown Westminster. The biggest sponsors of downtown Westminster, when we did the Greater Westminster Development Corporation, where we took the local government and businesses and put our interests together, we wanted to save these buildings, we wanted to expand businesses, and we wanted to make a cityscape, because that was the goal of the government. And the banks, the local banks we had at that time, just 20 years ago, provided the day-to-day money that was necessary to make everything happen. We don't have that now, but small businesses need access to money. They need access to capital. That's what they need. I would help them to get it from the regional and the national banks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warburton.
Yeah, I agree. One of the ways to help small businesses and probably medium-sized businesses is to help with the research and the information of about loans. Are there low-interest loans available out there from different organizations that could help the businesses and to get the money that they need? I do think one area of small business that maybe is overlooked but is growing and could do more is the small farms. You know, we have the ag preservation that's for farms over 60 acres, and sometimes will go down to 30 acres. But there's a lot of folks out there on 8, 10, 15 acres that are really making a dent into the small farming and bringing their products to the Westminster market, to the county ag center. I think the Westminster Community Market does a pretty good job of advertising that. But you know, there's a lot of interest in locally grown produce and meats, and I think that's an avenue where we could perhaps help out in some ways in how they can expand their market. And again, just you know, access to listen to people and find out what they need is always the most important thing, is to listen and find out what they know best what they need, the businesses themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Well, what we need to do is get the word out of things that we already are doing. We have the SBDC, Small Business Development Corporation, or company, which I don't believe too many people actually have even heard about. If you go to them, you have a problem with the business, they'll help you through it. They'll help you write a business plan. They'll help you find it with a day seminar. They'll point you to courses you could take at Carroll Community College to help out your business. They will do what needs to be done to help your business prosper. They're right here in downtown Westminster. They're right here to help, but most people don't even know that they exist. There's also courses through Carroll Community College which can be taken. Because some people, and what happens sometimes, someone goes to the SBDC and says, you know, I'm running a business, I'm running into this or that, this is happening. Now, if it can be solved with a day-long or weekend type of seminar or course, SBDC is more than willing to do that. If they can't be, if they need more help than that, then they are given a warm handoff to Carroll Community College with their business development over there, and they're shown where a course might be helping them out. Also, someone mentioned access to capital. Our own economic development department in Carroll County gives loans to small businesses. Now, they're small loans. I don't remember the exact amount, so I think it's 5,000 to 20, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere around that amount. And what these loans are basically given to, when you first start a small business, you don't have a track record yet, but you might need some money to get things moving along. So if you need it moving along, you go to the county economic development department. They look at your plan, they look at what you're going to do, they look at what you're doing, and they see if you're a good risk, and they can lend you the money, and often at a lower rate. Don't quote me on that, but often at a lower rate than what you can get from the banks. So we're given access, we're given help, we're doing a lot for small businesses in Carroll County. Just have to get the word out so more people know what's going on.
Okay, thank you. All right, this next question will start with Mr. Mathias. If elected, how would you work with the other commissioners to modernize our county parks to add turf fields at our parks and at the county high schools?
Well, I tell you, I think there are going to be some new commissioners, and I hope to be one of them. 2 have already retired, so that would be 3 right there. That'd be a majority, be a simple majority, maybe 3-2. I'm not so convinced about the turf field project over there, knowing that they've had some time to raise money and raise very little. It's very difficult to fundraise for community-type projects, and I think the government has to take that into consideration because, you know, somebody has to pay for it. And taxpayer money shouldn't maybe pay for the whole thing. If there is a community response, I'd like to see one. I think that's what, now the Carroll County Times, your editorial said, but I think that's what the commissioners, they're hoping somebody can step forward and move that project. But it can't hang out there forever. I mean, if it goes 2 budget cycles, the next board's probably going to do something else with the money if they can't get a community match to build that field. And I would just hold out hope that maybe somebody comes forward. But if they don't, I'm pretty sure they're probably going to recommit those funds to maybe something else that comes up that is all of a sudden a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Warburton.
It's not a matter of just working with the other commissioners. It would be a matter of working with the commissioners, the rec councils, the director of Recs and Parks, perhaps the school systems, the Carroll Community College, to all see if we can, bring in some funding from a lot of different areas. Parks, fields are certainly at probably a priority and are all being used as much as they can be used and be handled successfully. I do have a bit of a concern with the turf field being located at Turf Valley, it's a turf field I was going to say Manchester Valley, at North Carroll, because the county's not even, the commissioners aren't even sure what the disposition of that school is going to be right now. The plans that were there originally when it was closed seem to have fallen apart. So I would hesitate to even put the field there if the school building's not going to be accessible, if there's issues there with the fire alarm in the past, there's other issues with the school itself. I haven't talked about this with anybody, but maybe a better place would be to put one at Carroll Community College. There's going to be a soccer program starting there in another year. And, that would be a little bit more centrally located and maybe could get a little bit more funding. But certainly fields are at a priority in the county, and things do need to be looked at. But it needs to be a concerted effort, not just with the commissioners.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Well, I believe I was the commissioner that brought up putting the turf field in the stadium at North Carroll, because I want to try to give back to a community that just had the school closed, so we can do something for that community. I think it's obviously since I brought it up, I think it's a great idea. I think that it will, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. You'll have people playing tournaments there. You'll have, like your Super Bowl for football, your championship for lacrosse and field hockey and soccer. So all could be played under the lights, and it would be a fantastic thing to do. I'm still a firm believer in that. And when I originally proposed it, my proposal was for the county to pay the whole $1 million up front and get money back after it was opened. There was discussion among the commissioners saying that there was plenty of community support, that we wouldn't have to put all the money up front and that the money would come in and don't worry about it. So we put up half the money hoping that some money would come in. It hasn't worked that way. I'm still a big proponent of this. I still think it's a great idea. I would like to put it right there because, again, it's giving back to that community. Why there is some indecision on what to do with the North Carroll building, there has never been indecision from the Board of Commissioners that those fields would be used for athletics and for recreational purposes. Even if the building was sold, shuttered, torn down, those fields will still be used for athletic and recreational purposes. The Board of Commissioners have never wavered on that. And since my time's almost up, that's good. Thank you.
You got 25 seconds.
Well, that's all right.
Okay. All right, Mr. Gordon.
In reference to turf fields, I think it's a good idea. I think the unfortunate thing is we've already had that idea offered within the county, and unfortunately it was turned down. We had a turf field that was offered by a Westminster High School alum within the last, I'll say, 5 or 6 years. That decision was immediately turned down. They were going to fund the entire thing out of their own pocket, and the school system decided not to fund it because their concern was, well, if we can't have it at every school, we don't want it. So here we are today. We have $500,000 set aside for a turf field, and today we've only raised $10,000 from the community. I would love to know more as to the fundraising metrics and how we approach that. I know there's money out there. Whether the community as a whole has the appetite to do so would be interesting to learn more about, but I know for a fact that there's money within Carroll County that is consistently used to fund various projects from businesses and individuals. I would like to look at it further, but I do question the $10,000 as that is an exceptionally low number. I think we could all probably think of about 5 or 6 people that we could call, and we could probably find at least $100,000 in funding in less than a week. So my thoughts are I think we should look at it, but I don't want to let it run too long, maybe another year at best.
Okay, thank you. For this next question, we'll start with Ms. Warburton. Do you believe the bus routes that are currently offered by Carroll Transit Services in the county are a sufficient means of transportation?
Not for everyone, no, but I'm not sure how you could expand them and keep it cost effective. I mean, my understanding is there's no bus route out to New Windsor or Union Bridge. The furthest, it goes is Tawnytown and then into Westminster. There's one that goes around the Eldersburg, Sykesville area, and then there's one that comes up from Eldersburg to Westminster. The times are limited. You really have to plan ahead to be able to utilize it. And, some of the people that probably need it the most aren't served by it. Again, I haven't looked at the numbers to know how expensive it would be to expand it, but it does serve, I guess, the majority population areas with Westminster and Eldersburg. But there are a lot of areas that aren't accessible to it. And another thing with the cost of it, it does cost $2 or $3 per ride. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's each way. And if you have a couple kids with you, you have to pay for them. I know our church does one of the fundraisers we do is to provide the tickets to HSP so that people that need to use the service can get the tickets, because you have to go out to the airport area to get access to some of the Social Security services and things. So you have to have a vehicle or you have to use transit. And so I think it can be improved considerably, but as far as the metrics behind it and the money, I haven't had a chance to look into all that to date. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Frazier.
I don't think it's adequate right now, but as far as getting around the county for the neediest people that need it, that is being accomplished right now. We have an on-demand service, whereas if you call up in advance and call I don't have the number in front of me, but you call the number, you tell them you need to be picked up at your address, you tell them you need to go to the doctor, you need to go here or there, they will be out there. I believe you have to give them a day's notice, it might be more. A day's notice, they'll pick you up, they'll take you to where you need to go, they'll bring you back. They already do that. That's on-demand service. But I think what you're talking about mostly is the Trailblazer service, which are the bus routes around Carroll County. One reason we don't have enough bus routes around Carroll County is because I believe it's the last 4 to 5 years we were not getting any buses through the Maryland Department of Transportation. If something was being held up in court, a bus person was suing the state of Maryland, and when that happens, everything gets stopped. So we had 16 buses on backlog. We got those 16 buses, but to be honest with you, by the time we got them, we had 10 of our own buses that were in such terrible shape we had to get rid of them. So it wasn't like we got 16 new buses. We had 16 buses throughout, now running. We are trying to stand up 2 new bus routes right now. One of the downfalls of the system is that right now there's one of the routes being proposed, it goes through Hampstead, Manchester, comes into Westminster. If you want to take that bus route, fantastic, but the downside is that you're going to take about 90 minutes between you get dropped off and the bus comes around again to get you. I'd like to at least cut that time in half, but guess what? We need more buses. So we are applying for more buses each year for anticipating opening up new routes, but it takes a while. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gordon.
In reference to that, I don't completely think it's adequate at this point, but then the other area I wonder if we shouldn't be looking at sort of as an alternative would be, and I know Carroll hospitals utilize this in some fashion, is Uber and Lyft. So the question is there other technologies out there that we could potentially partner with and utilize to accomplish similar transportation without bringing on the added cost of additional buses and bus routes and employees. It would be an area I'd like to see more looked into at some point in the future.
Okay, Mr. Mathias.
I think the good thing is, if it isn't adequate now, the good thing is in the annual review of what the county supports, you get necessary feedback from the operators, and it would probably help you to assist them in any way in putting new routes together and trying to find out where they would like to see improvement. I don't know if the cost is the issue or if it's not that you can get a bus anytime you need to go somewhere. I think it's probably a big combination of both. And I would hope as a commissioner to listen and see from them what they think they would need from the county government that maybe they weren't getting now, and try to go in that position. Of course, the state of Maryland, provides so many of these buses we see as we travel through town as well. And, so in terms of financing them, they're excellent programs at the state. I would hope we would always be able to get the ones that we would need for future expansion of our current system. Thanks.
Okay. Right. Who did I start with on that last one? Down there.
I started last.
Okay. All right.
Probably started with me.
I thought I could make it through the whole way with keep it all on track. Apparently not.
Hey, pretty good.
Almost.
Pretty good.
Only an hour and a half. All right. So this next one we'll start with Commissioner Frazier. One of the candidates earlier brought up the town and county agreement. This question from our audience simply asks, how do you feel about the current amount being reimbursed in the Westminster town and county agreement?
Well, I think the town and county agreement is adequate. The town and county agreement is for the county pays the town a certain amount of money, and the Westminster somewhere around $1 million a year, if I'm not mistaken, for services that they provide that the county then therefore does not have to provide. But you also have to remember that there's plenty of services that the county provides for the city, so they don't have to provide them. We don't get anything back for that, and that's fine. But it's kind of a two-way street here. It's not that the towns just provide services that the counties don't have to provide. The county provides services as well, and we don't get anything back from the towns, and we do have the town and county agreement. I also would like to mention that Carroll County was providing money for their own town-county agreement before it was required by the state of Maryland. And the amount of money that they have given in the past is generally more than is required by the state of Maryland. I have mentioned something to my fellow commissioners, and we haven't brought it up yet officially, but I believe we will, and maybe the next board will. There are two different formulas about how much money to give to the town and county. One is our own formula, and one is the state's formula. Our formula, like I said, is 90% of the time higher than what the state's is. But we could look at it for each individual town, look at both formulas. Whichever one was higher, that's what they get. To be honest with you, there's not that much money difference in between them, so why not do it that way? I think everyone would be a little bit happier that way. But I do think it's an adequate town-county agreement. Like City of Westminster gets right around $1 million a year from the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
In reference to the town and county agreement, obviously, as previously stated, they do get $1 million a year currently. I think, given the circumstances, yes, we cover things on the county side and they cover things on the municipal side, but I would have no issues with sitting down with the municipalities and discussing those, because costs are constantly going up and we need to make sure that everybody is covering their end on both sides. So I would have no issues with sitting down with the municipality of Westminster and discussing that and taking a larger look at it. That doesn't definitively say it would change, but I'd be more than happy to at least address that and have a conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mathias.
I want to point out, most of the people in this district who are voting in this District 3, many of them are residents of both the city and county, and we pay taxes to each. So, the citizens are already funding both governments. It's nice that the county is providing some money back to the city, which they could use, and I would look forward to continuing that tradition as if successful in this commissioner race. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Warburton.
To be honest, I'm not that familiar with the agreement. I assume if someone asked the question, there must be some issues with it. I'm not a city resident. I think I may be the only one up here that's not. But as mentioned, you know, the county does provide services to the city provides services to some of the county residents. I know I was involved with stormwater management when the towns all had what's called a permit from MDE, a stormwater permit. They each had their own small permit, and they could be responsible at the federal level for violations. And I was involved with the discussions to bring all the towns under the umbrella of the county permit so that they could work together. Now, the financial piece of that, I don't know how that was worked out, but you know, there's certainly lots of interaction between the county and the city on different programs, and I would, you know, be open to any of the concerns, listen to the concerns, and if it needs to be reassessed, you know, consider that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start with Mr. Gordon for this one. Would you be supportive and/or would you actively encourage a move from the commissioner form of government to either charter government, code home rule, or some other changes to the current 5 commissioners elected by district?
Well, we've had attempts a number of times over the last number of years to change the charter, which all of them have been unsuccessful to date. There was an attempt, I believe, to start that conversation up about a year and a half ago, and that sort of dissolved and went nowhere. Charter government comes down to how the charter is written, and then that will also play into how that moves forward, whether the committee that's set up to discuss charter, and then of course it goes where the public has the opportunity to review that charter, and then the public has the ability to then change that charter if it does not fit their liking. It's one of those situations that's up to the voter. I have no real stance on that at this point. I think if it's been taken to referendum before and failed, let the voter make that call. But the one thing I will bring up tonight, which is similar but different, and I hear this consistently, and it doesn't matter if it's District 3, it's District 1, it's District 4, doesn't matter where it is. When we went from 3 at large to 5 by district, there are a large amount of the population that feel very disenfranchised as voters because they do not have the ability to vote or have any influence with all of us. Now, we have 5 commissioners. We're not district commissioners. We don't make decisions solely on the district. We make decisions on the entire county for everyone. Some people have asked me, would you be in favor of us maybe going to district commissioners at large? And personally, I would welcome that because I think disenfranchising voters in the United States is an absolute ridiculous situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mathias.
Since I'm running in a commissioner form of district for a commissioner's seat, I think I would be an incredible hypocrite if I didn't say this is the system we should be having right this minute. But in the future, what I'm hopeful for in Carroll County is that we also start electing Democrats to office. I'd like to see bipartisan government in Carroll County. And perhaps if we don't get that eventually, I'm going to join the charter movement. And, you know, because I think we can do more for our citizens that live here. We're not all the same. We're not one party. We're unaffiliated. We're Democrats. We're Republicans. We can be a lot of things. And I think a lot of people are disenfranchised from the county government right now. And I don't think there's much happening in the way of programming to really go out and find out what everybody's thinking. So, and because of that reason, that's why people talk about changing the governments all the time. But I would hope we can all get along in this election and actually, you know, put some other people involved into the process and represent everyone. More people need to be represented in our local governments. Thank you.
Ms. Warburton.
I don't plan on making it an issue to try to move to charter government. As mentioned, it's been brought up on the ballot several times and has failed for a variety of reasons. I mean, maybe it is something to consider in the future if there's a groundswell of public support for it. I would, though, take an issue with, I've heard at several of the forums and all that the charter form of government is just so much more expensive than commissioners. And if you look at Frederick County, which just went to charter government, they have 7 county council people that each make $22,000 a year with no benefits, and the county executive makes $95,000 a year. Here in Carroll, we have 5 commissioners making $45,000 each with benefits, and they just requested that that salary be raised to $51,000 a year. The commissioners have the potential for having lifetime health benefits at a rate that's higher than the county employees' retired health benefits. So if you do the math, the commissioner's form of government, at least the way it is now in Carroll versus Frederick, it's about a wash. So the argument that one is more expensive to the other than the other, I think, is an argument that really isn't valid. I also think sometimes the 5 commissioners leads to some inefficient board meetings. There seems to be a lot of talk at the beginning of the meetings. Commissioners like to get on their soapbox and talk about various issues that don't have to do with the county. Meanwhile, the director of the budget and the assistant director and all the financial analysts and the department heads are sitting there for 20, 30 minutes, you know, sitting there doing nothing until they finally get to the meat of the meeting. But I don't plan on doing anything now, but I do think that, you know, both have advantages and disadvantages.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Frazier.
Well, I was one of the 2 commissioners on this board who was looking to try to get a charter written, so obviously I'm kind of in favor of moving forward with a charter. But what I'm really in favor of is having a charter written and having the people of Carroll County look at it and vote on that charter. What's happening right now, as soon as charter government is brought up, people say, oh, wait, it's way too expensive. Do you know, and I heard this at one of the other forums, that the taxes in Frederick County have tripled since they put in charter government? If that was true, Frederick County would be probably deserted right now. So no, that hasn't happened. Do you know that in Arundel County, they've passed another 200 and some laws since they've had charter government? True or not true, I don't know, but just because one thing precedes another doesn't mean it causes it to happen. Charter government, I think, I'd like to see the process worked out. What has happened in Carroll County, each time that I can remember that has been brought up, has gone out, and people have gone out and said things that are blatantly untrue about the charter. The last time an actual charter was written and was put up there, just prior to the vote on the charter, people put flyers out. And the exact wording of the flyers, I don't remember, but it had something to do with, do you want to pay higher taxes on your motorcycle, on your RV, on your boat, on your second car? Because if you vote for charter, you're going to do that. Now, all that goes against the Maryland Constitution, so it couldn't possibly be in the charter, but it didn't make any difference. People didn't have enough time to research it, and charters voted down. Let's let the process work itself out. Let's have a charter committee write a charter. When it gets out there, let people read it and decide for themselves if they want it. If they want it, fine. If they don't, fine again. But let the process work itself out. We've never done that in Carroll County. We've never had the process work itself out without some group coming in and stomping all over it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll start wrapping up. So we'll start with Mr. Mathias for this one. With the recent passage of enabling legislation in the Maryland General Assembly that gave county government some authority over fire and emergency services, what do you see as the future for volunteer fire services in Carroll County?
I think what's going to happen, and it might even be in the next 4 years, the next term of commissioners, what the state is asking the counties to do is really look to make sure that fire protection and the people that do it and the ambulance services, they're not all, you know, the ambulances are paid, the firemen aren't. I mean, they're trying to get it, in the state of Maryland, they're trying to get the counties to focus on a uniform system in their county. All the fire departments are not created equal. Some are very small, some are very large, like Westminster. So the county, I think, has been very smart in helping them buy equipment and, helping them to equalize the service. But I think in the future, the question's going to come down to, do we go to paid firemen? Because, the demand. I mean, many of these people, they volunteer here, but they work in other places. I think eventually what the state is saying is the county should go out and start looking at a master plan for the future. And I think this Board of Commissioners has been very actively involved with the associations and the people who represent the different 14 fire companies and their volunteers. And I think they should get all the benefits they can from the county government to help them to do this. So I think the partnership between the state and the local, in the next 4 years, we might be able to do a lot more to fix the problem of not having firemen when you need them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Warburton.
I think the move to more paid firefighters is inevitable. It's already in the works. As mentioned, the enabling legislation was passed, and that was done with my understanding is with the Board of Commissioners and the Carroll County Volunteer Emergency Services Association, known as CC Visa. That language was was written together, and that CC Visa approved of that language, and that a work group has already been formed within CC Visa to look at how to move towards at least some additional paid firefighters. Some companies already have more paid personnel than others. The City of Westminster already has, the Westminster station already has 4 shifts of 6 paid personnel there between the EMS, the paramedics, and the engine drivers and others. I do hope that it can remain, that as the move goes towards more paid firefighters, that it can remain a combined service where you have paid and volunteer personnel. I know that's a sort of friction. I know several people that I work with are volunteers in Frederick County and other places, and sometimes there's friction between the paid firefighters and the volunteers based on hours, and the union saying that, concerned with the volunteers taking hours away from the paid firefighters. So I hope what's ever decided, it can remain a combined service, but it's definitely moving that way. Like I say, one concern is that there's no money in the 5-year plan for this, even though it's being supported by the current board.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier.
Thank you. First, I want to state that before this legislation was passed, Carroll County did not have to stand up a fire service. They didn't have to give the fire companies any money at all. It was not part of our commissioner form of government. We didn't, of course, we did it. Why wouldn't we? It's public safety. But it didn't have to be done. Now with this legislation, this gives Carroll County the ability to work with all the fire companies and try to get them to move forward, try to get them to move. Because I believe a transition into a paid force is inevitable, hopefully not anytime soon. We've already put money aside for what I would call an incentive program for volunteer firefighters. Some of the incentives which were mentioned, and we haven't decided on which ones are going to be funded and which ones aren't, but some maybe reduced tuition at Carroll Community College, a free phone with phone service. Just little things like that. The younger people could be living at firehouses if they could support people to live there, so they wouldn't have to pay rent, but they would be kind of on call 24/7, that kind of thing. So we've looked at different incentives. We haven't decided which ones are going to go with or not. And these incentives, which were brought to us by CC Visa in a group. So we didn't come up with them. They were brought forward with us. We put money aside for this already. It's also, we put aside, I think in this year's budget, around $13 million for CC Visa. And that goes to the fire companies. So it's not like we don't give the fire companies anything. But the fact is, if we went to a paid force, we'd be talking about probably $20 to $30 million more per year. We simply don't have that money right now. So we're looking at the transition. So what we're doing is we're looking at best practices from other counties that have made this transition, because other counties have made this transition from volunteer to paid firefighters. So we're looking at best practices there. How can we make the transition? How can we keep the volunteers as long as we possibly can? Because right now those community fire centers are like the backbones of their little communities. So we want to keep them vibrant and alive. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gordon.
Well, obviously it's heading in that direction so far at this point. In reference to the county putting aside $13 million, there's other counties that they would spend $80 million just on equipment in a year for their paid fire department. So economically, when we're looking at it, we're looking at huge numbers that at this current situation we can't fundamentally cover. I do know, as others have mentioned, some of the incentives. I do think we might want to even consider looking at possible tax credits for some of the folks that are volunteering, give them a real reason to want to participate. And you know, a phone's nice, but a phone's not the same as putting your life on the line, and it's not the same as economically assisting the public. Thank you.
Okay. All right, this last question, and before we get to our closing statements, we'll start with Ms. Warburton. And a question from our audience. If elected, what specifically do you see in the proposed FY19 budget that could be considered excessive spending?
That could be considered what?
Excessive spending.
In the FY19 budget?
Yes.
The one, I don't really see any excessive spending in the FY19 budget. I mean, a lot of stuff was cut. There were some tough decisions made to not fund certain things as much as what the like the school board and the sheriff's office had requested. There were some tough decisions made. And it's a balanced budget, so I'm not quite sure why we would make changes to the FY19 budget. I mean, that's going to be approved next, or not, it's not going to be approved, but there's a budget hearing on it next week, and then it'll be approved later in the month. So that'll pretty much be a done deal. I mean, we could look at the budgets going forward, but the FY19 will be approved by the end of May, long before I'm in office.
Well, since I had a hand in forming the budget, I don't see anything excessive in the budget. The budget's not a done deal at this point. If you come to the public hearing on May 15th at Carroll Community College, you can make your feelings known and heard about what you think should and should not go into the budget. And we do consider all those opinions before we pass the final budget. But as far as excessive, the budget was very, very tight this year, and it's very tight for the outgoing years as well. So if there was something excessive, believe me, we would have ferreted it out and got rid of it. And I'm about to give Commissioner Rothschild a compliment, so listen closely. With Commissioner Rothschild being in office for 7 years that he has been, if there was any excess, he would have found it. That's like his job. He goes and finds things that he thinks that we spent too much money on, and he ferrets it out, and he does a great job with that. So with him being in there and finding that out, we don't have any excesses. I mean, just the way it is. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
In reference to excesses in the budget, I think, obviously, as everybody has stated, and even the commissioner stated at their deliberations, it's been a very tough year for budgets. The only thing I would wonder about is if there were any entities in which we could get matched funding from either a federal or state level, so we would have additional funding in reference to that. But specifically, I don't have anything at this point, so. That's it.
Mr. Mathias.
I think the other statements pretty well speak for themselves. I think when they finished this budget process, they were looking for money and couldn't find any. So I'm pretty sure there's really no excessive spending in this one. But I would look forward to next year's budget in terms of some of these local projects that haven't been fully funded yet. And I would not let them go maybe more than one more year, because I think you're getting away from priorities that you should be funding in your budget. You just can't let things sit out there, you know, forever, amen. I mean, if money's not coming in, it's not coming in.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll give each of the candidates an opportunity to give a 2-minute closing statement, and just to throw you all off, we'll actually start down here and work our way up this way.
Oh, wow, you did throw me off. Okay, no problem. Some of you may remember that I ran for commissioner 4 years ago. As someone who majored in forestry in college and prefers gardening or going for a hike in the woods over getting dialed up for special events, one of the more difficult things I find for campaigning as a candidate is having to talk about myself. However, one of the more meaningful happenings during my last campaign was getting a phone call from my younger brother on the day of the general election saying that he was coming up to the area and wanted to know where he could help out as best needed. Now, my younger brother is pretty much a staunch Republican. We do agree on some issues, but we have some animated debates on others. But he does know me well, and he knows that I care, and he knows that I'm true to my word, and that I take the time to research the issues, and that I will work for the best interest of all Carroll residents. For those of you who don't know me, I hope this forum has given you a sense of who I am and my position on some of the issues. I welcome any opportunity to talk to you either individually, in a small group, or at a larger get-together. I am having a meet and greet this coming Friday, May 11th, from 4:30 to 8 p.m. at Landon C. Burns Park, right next to the Ag Center. It's free and open to all. So I encourage you to come over and ask the question that didn't get asked tonight, or just to chat about things. I'd also recommend that you like my Facebook page, Maria Warburton for Carroll, to stay informed of future events, and you can email me at info@mariawarburton.com. And I thank everyone for your interest in this election, and I ask for your vote on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mathias.
I want to thank the sponsors tonight who have done an outstanding job, I believe, in this election in making sure that people can get informed. If you read our name in the paper, it's the Carroll County Times, and we thank Wayne for being here tonight. I think he's asked some good questions. I want to thank the carrollmediacenter.org, because if you want to know more about us, you should go there as well, and I would hope that you would. I would ask for your support and consideration in this election. Of course, running as a Democrat, I hope you're for bipartisan government, and we need to get everybody involved. I think the more people involved with experience and different backgrounds will lead us to a better future. I have expectations for the county in the next 4 years. I have some things I think we could do to enhance the quality of life here, starting with setting priorities and budgets, like for funding education. And I would like to see that happen. I would appreciate your support. If you have any questions, the information at the carrollmediacenter.org, you can contact us immediately through there on your computer or by phone. Look forward to meeting many of you after this event tonight and knocking on your doors between now and November. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
I want to thank the Carroll County Times, the Media Center, and those in attendance both here and those online for participating this evening. I am always available to all members of our community. I'm someone who's engaged in our community, whether it be local businesses, nonprofits, and our residents. I will make all residents and the future of our county the focus of my activities, not just on a part-time basis, but full-time, as I'm running to serve you and not be a politician. But a true public servant to the community, and this community has enriched my life in so many ways over the years. I am here for you. My door's always open. I'm available pretty much consistently 24/7. This election is about the future of Carroll County, and I humbly ask for your consideration and vote on June 26th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier.
I want to thank the Community Media, I want to thank the Community Media Center and the Carroll County Times for putting on this forum. I also want to thank the citizens of District 3 for voting for me last election and allowing me to serve as your county commissioner for the last 3.5 years. I hope you will agree that the county has improved during that time. Economic development is at an all-time high. Carroll County, in fact, the unemployment rate has stayed below 4% for the past 3 years. It's currently 3.7%, well below the state average of 4.5%. Carroll County has the lowest crime rate in the state, along with the highest graduation rate in Maryland. We are one of the top counties in the country with ag preservation, with those 70,000 acres currently in ag pres, on their way to 100,000. As you can see, the county is doing very well. I'd like to have the opportunity to keep the county moving in a positive direction, so I'm asking for your vote on June 26th. Remember, you can also take advantage of early voting between June 14th to the 21st. I will be at the Westminster Flower and Jazz Festival this Saturday. Stop by to say hi, ask a question, and even pick up a yard sign. I'll be happy to talk with you about anything I've done as a commissioner and my plans for my next term. If you cannot make it down here, give me a call. My cell phone number is 443-340-6643. Thank you, and vote Dennis Frazier, County Commissioner.
Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Charles Harrison.
We'd like to take this opportunity to thank the candidates for joining us this evening, Mr. Wayne Carter, editor of the Carroll County Times, and to you, the audience, the live streamed audience. Thank you for coming and thank you for participating. A special thanks to those of you that submitted questions that were thought-provoking and challenged our candidates. Coverage of this event will again be rebroadcast beginning at the Carroll Media Center.org, and it will be shown again on cable channels 19 and channel 23 beginning on Tuesday, May 15th. It would also be available on demand. Now, we encourage residents to register to vote on June 5th. Voting is not just a right, it's a responsibility. And we encourage you all to take that responsibility seriously. Please take time to learn more about these candidates who are running in the 2018 primary elections, and be certain to vote on June 28th. Thank you and have a good evening. Travel safely going home. Thank you.